Canada is acquiring a new fleet of 88 state-of-the-art F-35 fighter jets.
We believe that we didn't get enough when it comes to the F-35s. The industrial benefits are not enough.
Canada paid billions for protection it wouldn't receive for years, and nobody told the pilots. The twist isn't that the jets were delayed. The twist is that the delay was already known when the money changed hands. In December 2022, Canada made one of the largest defense payments in its history. Nearly 2 billion Canadian dollars left government accounts and landed with the world's most powerful military contractor. No down payment, no partial installment, full payment. The purpose was simple and urgent: secure Canada's skies, especially the Arctic, at a time when global tensions were accelerating faster than diplomatic language could keep up. The aircraft promised were among the most advanced ever built. Fifth-generation fighters, wrapped in stealth, fused with sensors, marketed as the future of air dominance. On paper, it looked like a bold move. In reality, it was the beginning of a silent gap between what Canada paid for and what Canada actually had. 3 years passed. In January 2025, at a cold northern airbase where winter feels permanent, a senior officer opened an email that was supposed to be routine. Delivery schedules are usually boring. This one wasn't. The message confirmed that the first new fighter jet would arrive in late 2029. 7 years. 7 years between payment and protection. Outside that office window, CF-18s, designed in the late 1970s, were still being prepped for Arctic patrols. Their airframes were older than many of the pilots flying them. Their avionics had been patched, upgraded, stretched well beyond what they were ever meant to do. Yet they remained Canada's frontline defense over one of the most strategically sensitive regions on Earth. The Arctic doesn't wait for procurement cycles. What followed wasn't a press conference or a parliamentary debate. It was an email, a short, frustrated message written internally, never intended for public eyes. It questioned a single, uncomfortable truth. How does a country pay billions for security it won't have until nearly a decade later? The email leaked. Within hours, it spread across military circles, then into public forums, then into headlines. Not because it was dramatic, but because it asked the question everyone else had avoided. Who is protecting Canadian airspace right now? As attention grew, analysts started comparing timelines, not hypotheticals, real contracts, real deliveries. Other countries had ordered modern fighter aircraft in the same period and received them in under 2 years, not 7, not even close. The difference wasn't technology, it was production philosophy. Some manufacturers built for immediacy, others built for prestige. And that distinction mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. Behind the scenes, another document surfaced, this one far more damaging. An internal industry memo circulated shortly after Canada's payment had been received. It outlined communication strategies, not engineering challenges. Avoid firm delivery dates, redirect focus to capabilities, emphasize long-term advantages. In other words, sell the future, stay vague about the present. The implication was chilling. Delays weren't an accident, they were baked into the system. Then reality arrived, unannounced and airborne. In the early hours of a winter morning, long-range foreign aircraft approached the edge of Canada's Arctic air defense zone. Not an invasion, not an attack, something more calculated. Reconnaissance, the kind that measures response times, maps radar coverage, listens quietly, and leaves without firing a shot. Detection came late. Scramble orders went out immediately. But distance doesn't care about urgency. From southern bases, intercept aircraft needed hours, not minutes. By the time they were airborne and climbing, the mission was already over. The foreign aircraft turned away, having collected everything it came for. No shots fired, no violation headlines, just another reminder that sovereignty without speed is theoretical. That incident didn't make front-page news, but within defense circles, it landed hard. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even rare. It was part of a pattern, one that couldn't be fixed with press releases or future promises. Soon after, the officer whose emails sparked the conversation was quietly removed from her position. Official explanations were vague: chain of command, procedure. Unofficially, the message was clear: challenging procurement decisions has consequences. But the story didn't end there. What followed was something far more dangerous to the status quo than an email: data. Over months, flight logs, response times, declassified reports, and operational records were compiled into a single analysis. Not emotional, not political, just numbers. And those numbers told a story no one could spin. They showed how often intercepts failed, not because of pilot skill, but because of geography and time. They showed how often foreign aircraft entered, observed, and exited without meaningful challenge. And they projected what would happen if nothing changed before the end of the decade. When that analysis became public, it spread faster than any leaked message ever could, because this time, the evidence spoke louder than authority, and it forced a question that defense planners across NATO could no longer ignore. Is the most advanced aircraft in the world still the best choice if it arrives too late to matter? The numbers changed everything. When the analysis went public, it wasn't framed as an accusation. It was framed as a mirror. And what it reflected made people uncomfortable. Over a 2-year period, dozens of foreign military flights entered Canada's Arctic Air Defense Identification Zone. Most of them were not intercepted in time, not because Canada lacked pilots, courage, or intent, but because distance and aging aircraft turned response into delay. The success rate was low, painfully low. In scenarios where response should have taken minutes, it took hours, and in aerial defense, hours mean failure. By the time interceptors reached the projected contact points, the aircraft they were supposed to challenge had already completed their missions and left. Intelligence gathered, signals recorded, patterns mapped. Airspace wasn't violated in a legal sense, but it was tested, repeatedly. The report didn't dramatize this. It simply compared two futures, one based on waiting, the other based on availability. If nothing changed, the same pattern would repeat year after year until the end of the decade. Aging aircraft pushed beyond design limits, maintenance costs climbing, pilots trained for jets they wouldn't fly for years, billions spent, yet capability postponed. But the report also modeled an alternative timeline, one where modern aircraft, available sooner, not later, were deployed forward in the Arctic. The projected difference was staggering. Interception rates jumped from symbolic to decisive, from occasional success to near constant presence. The implication was impossible to ignore. This was never a debate about which jet was more advanced in theory. It was about which aircraft existed, where and when it actually mattered. As the analysis spread, it triggered something rare in defense circles: quiet panic. Not public outrage, internal reassessment. Procurement officers across NATO started rereading their own contracts with new eyes: delivery clauses, production queues, priority tiers. They all saw the same thing. The world's most powerful fighter program was also the world's most congested. One production line, dozens of countries, fixed capacity, rigid priority rules. Early partners and domestic orders always came first. Everyone else waited. And waiting had become a strategic liability. Country after country realized they were standing in the same line, holding receipts for security that wouldn't arrive until geopolitical conditions might be completely different. Tensions weren't slowing down, they were accelerating. In response, evaluations quietly shifted, not canceled outright, but reconsidered. Alternatives resurfaced. Questions once dismissed as short-term thinking were now asked openly. How soon can this aircraft fly missions from our bases? How fast can it intercept? How many years will we be exposed while we wait? Then came the hearings. Canada's Defense Committee didn't summon executives or announce dramatic reversals. Instead, it focused on process, how timelines were evaluated, how delivery risk was weighted, how future procurement decisions would prevent capability gaps from being disguised as modernization. The officer whose emails started everything was called to testify. She didn't speak about betrayal or punishment. She spoke about math, about distances, about minutes versus hours, about how sovereignty in the Arctic is not defined by statements, but by presence. One figure silenced the room. By the time the first new fighter would land, Canada would have spent billions more simply to keep old jets barely operational, money that produced no new defensive advantage. And during that entire waiting period, foreign aircraft would have been free to test, probe, and observe hundreds of times. Not because Canada chose weakness, because it chose delay. The outcome surprised many. The officer was not sidelined again. She was reinstated, then elevated. Her role shifted from operational command to advisory authority, not to revisit one contract, but to change how future ones were judged. Soon after, other countries reached out. Quiet consultations, shared concerns, shared spreadsheets. The conversation across NATO began to change. Technology still mattered, but delivery time was no longer treated as a footnote, because a fighter jet that arrives too late is not deterrence, it's decoration. The final lesson was simple and uncomfortable. Defense procurement is not about buying the best machine. It's about buying the right capability for the moment you're actually in. Stealth, sensors, and software mean nothing if the aircraft is still years away while your airspace is being tested today. This story was never really about jets. It was about promises versus presence, about how modern warfare doesn't wait for production schedules, about how sovereignty isn't lost in dramatic battles, but in quiet, repeated moments when response comes too late. And it was about one truth that spreadsheets made impossible to ignore. A nation doesn't defend itself with contracts. It defends itself with aircraft in the air, now. Now it's your turn. Do you think delivery time should outweigh cutting-edge technology in defense procurement? Or should countries always wait for the most advanced systems, no matter how long it takes? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this documentary gave you a new perspective, like the video, subscribe, and join the discussion, because these decisions shape the future long before the aircraft ever arrive.